Don't shake it up. Number 2, the correct way to drink whiskey. I'm sure you've been told, many people, there is only one way. Very important. Exactly the way you like it to. Don't let anybody tell you different. But I'm going to tell you how to drink it properly. But it is always up to you, the consumer, the whiskey lover, how you do it. And 3, before we go on, forget what you think you know about whiskey. Any whiskey. Because we're different. So, first things first, I'm Richard. I like to walk around a lot, so if I hide behind stuff and you can't see me or you can't hear me, shout, put your hand up. I don't want this to be me shouting at you, talking at you loudly about whiskey. You have any questions, stop me, put your hand up or just shout out. Whatever you want to know, please stop me. Because either I'll ignore you and carry on, I'll stop and answer your question, or I won't know and I'll just ignore it. So that's all that can happen, so stop me at any time. But you have to be loud, so it's hard to see and hear from up here. So, any whiskey fans in the audience, or are you all newbies? Couple? Is that it, just the 1, 2, 3, 4, right. Has anyone been to a whiskey tasting before? Couple? Yeah, that's good. Jolly good. Anyone seen this stuff before? Yes? Couple? Most people say no. Doesn't even look like whiskey. Looks like Tiffany booze. Right. You, sir. How do you pronounce it?
Sorry?
How do you say the name? What is it?
Bruichladdich?
Close. Not bad. Anyone else? Shout out. Oh, we've got a lady dressed in Bruichladdich over there. It is actually, no matter how many letters you see, it's a very tough word. It's actually one of the 50 hardest to pronounce words in the Scottish language. So we get rid of some of them, we don't need all of them. Brook. Laddie. Not Bruichladdich. None of that. Bruichladdich. We're lazy over in the UK, so we make it easy. If that's too tough, call it laddie. That's why we call the blue one the classic laddie. Very, very simple. So before we drink the booze, I'm going to spend maybe 10, 15 minutes racing through what whiskey is, because although we know kind of what it is, it's a liquor that sits in a bottle, not a lot of us are actually really, truly aware of what whiskey really, really is and what it's about. And a lot of the time, especially in the modern world, people focus on the wrong thing. Because people that drink it on this side of the world are very detached from the people that make it on the other side. And we don't really know what goes on either side. In fact, some of the guys that make this would be amazed the fact that you can walk into any bar in Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, and buy a bottle of whiskey. If you ask for a bottle of whiskey in the UK, they say no. What are you, a lunatic? They won't give it to you. So it's very different. So, there are 4 main categories of Scotch whiskey. Number 1, most important one I like to think, single malt whiskey. And there we have our classic laddie. So pretty. So single malt whiskey is whiskey made from malted barley in one distillery, one place. And it has to be matured in oak in Scotland for a minimum of 3 years. Single malt whiskey, that's what it is. Blended malt whiskey, now this is a little bit new, a little bit strange, a bit controversial. And it's basically a blend of single malt whiskies. In theory it's simple, but in the whiskey world it was a bit new and a bit crazy when it came out, this sort of style of whiskey. Single grain is quite a new popular whiskey which is coming out, style of whiskey. And single grain whiskey is Scottish whiskey, but it doesn't have to be barley or malted barley like the main brands of whiskey. It can be wheat, rye, corn, anything. But the biggest difference is the way it's made. It's made the same way as vodka. It's column distilled, so very, very clean, very light spirit. It's not copper pot distilled like malt whiskey. So it has a lot less character, a lot less flavour and strength. And finally, blended whiskey, which most people are familiar with, which is a blend of single malts and single grains. So this isn't going to be a whole PowerPoint style presentation, it's just I wanted to highlight a few things so you can really get it in there. And there's a lot of pictures and wonderful stuff about Scotland and distilling which people don't get to see, so I have got some pictures I'll relate to. But this is Scotland, the whisky regions, although Scotland is the whisky region. We have lowlands down the bottom, very sweet, grassy, fresh, juicy whiskies from there. Moving up into the highlands where you have things get a little bit drier, a little bit oakier, a little bit more complex. Then the biggest whiskey producing area is Speyside, which is the northeast on the coast. And that's where you have a mixture of the sort of the oakiness, the sweetness, the dryness, and a bit of the sea salt air coming in as well. So most whiskey in Scotland is made in the Speyside region. And that's where a lot of the most famous whiskies come from. And then you have the islands, which are the little bits all around the edge. And moving down to the southwest, we have this funny little place called Islay. But it's not Islay. It's spelled like that again. The Scottish love spelling things and saying it differently. Keeps you on your toes. It's actually Islay. Like, I love you. And I especially love Bruichladdich, and that's where we are there. So Islay is very famous for smoky whiskies. And this is what it looks like. Now, at first glance, that doesn't look like the Scotland that I have in my imagination when I talk about whiskey. I imagine a lot greyer, less colour, more rain. But Islay is actually an amazing place. It's stunning, it's green, it's lush. Everywhere you go, you are treading on thyme, you're treading on mint, there's juniper grows there. It's lush. Everywhere you go, things are sprouting out of the ground, all different colours. It's an amazing place. And at night it's beautiful as well, because that's when you go to the pub. So, that's Bruichladdich. Bruichladdich is a village because it's a single malt, so the name is representative of where it comes from. And that's our tiny little village there. And it's very important. If you see right in the top, in the corner, there's a little very bright blue lake up there. That is where our water comes from. So we don't ship in water or anything. We use water from that lake for the first distillation, and then we use water from a local well to actually water it down to bottling strength. So we have everything there. And now we're getting into why we're different. And you've got a lot of funny pots and tubs in front of you. All will become clear. So, barley. It all comes from barley, which is very important. We are, as far as I know, the only single malt whiskey to use Scottish barley, 100%. Which is kind of weird when you think about champagne, you know, because all the grapes obviously come from France. They obviously come from the Champagne region, because it's French champagne. When you have your nice Rioja from Spain, you know, it's going to be all Spanish grapes. That's what makes it Rioja. But with Scottish whiskey, people buy their barley from Canada, from Europe, and if you drink any big brand whiskey, Scotch whiskey, you're not drinking Scottish barley. That is bought in from the big international grain suppliers. They probably couldn't even tell you where it comes from. But we started, well, we're from 1881, so we've been around a long time. But we had a bit of a revolution in the early 2000s, and we decided terroir matters. Where things come from really matters. So we're Islay whiskey. We want to use Islay products. So we use Scottish barley until recently. Now we're using Islay barley. We're the first Islay whiskey to use Islay barley since 1914. So we're trying to do some very different things, as you can see by the way we look and the sort of people that talk about it. I'm not big and Scottish with a big beard and a kilt, although you can't see it. We're a bit different. So barley's important. And I took this picture in March on Islay. End of March, it was actually the last day of March, and it was a bit sad taking this picture, because if I was to take this picture in the fields in the mainland, there would be barley growing. But we can't plant barley on Islay until the 20th of April every year, because that's the day the geese leave. These are the problems that we have growing Islay barley, because Islay is home to 3 colonies of geese, and they're all protected, so we can't kill them or eat them, and we can't do anything. We have to wait for them to leave before we plant our barley. So it's weird problems that we have making our whiskey that other people don't have. We hate geese. There's a lot of deer there as well, but we can eat them. That's fine. So we don't mind. And then eventually it'll turn into this sort of stuff, lovely grassy green barley. And very quickly, before we drink the booze, we're flying through this. This is how you make whiskey. So I'm going to jump around because I don't like talking on stage. It's scary, all the lights. So, we start off with our barley, which then gets taken to beds malting. And malting basically means getting the barley wet so it starts to grow and then stopping it from growing anymore. And that changes the starches and sugars inside so we can then use it to make alcohol. That's why we have malt whiskey. We have to do it to actually give us the fuel to make the booze. So that's malted and dried for 2 to 3 days, and then it gets taken to the next part, where you may have heard of something called peat. It's a funny mud type stuff. Looks like this. Sometimes this is used in making whiskey, and this is what we use to fuel our fires. So you can see at the bottom it says peat or warm air. Once we have our barley wet, we want to dry it. If we use warm air to dry our barley, we get a lovely, clean, beautiful, crisp whiskey. The alternative is to use peat, which is basically like putting the barley on a barbecue, because peat lets a lot of smoke go, and we end up with a very smoky flavour, just like a barbecue. So that's the difference between the 2 styles of malt whiskey, peated and unpeated. Now in Islay, every other whiskey that comes from Islay is peated. But as you can see, we're a little bit different. So let's try not peating our whiskey. So that's why ours is a little bit different. And then it goes to milling, and then it gets turned into beer, and then we distill that, we stick it in some barrels, and then we end up with whiskey. But we are concerned at Bruichladdich with what happens before the barrel. Everyone is so focused on 18 years, 21 years, 12 years. Well, that's really great. But if you put a bad whiskey in a good barrel for 18 years, it doesn't make any difference. So we're like, right, we care about barley because people grow our barley and we can control it. This is where we mix the barley with the water, and it gets into this big tank, and that's an original tank we use. We don't actually have any computers in our distillery at all. We do have a very intricate, complex, up-to-date system about measuring how much mash or liquid is in that tub, and it gets mixed up like that as well. Then it ferments, and this is where it becomes beer in these big mash tubs, which are brilliant, and they're actually, again, wood, not modern. They're really, really old Oregon pine. Then we distill whiskey, and we have 4 very long, very big stills with a lot of copper, and we distill very, very slowly, and it trickles out nice and clear like this. And then we stick it in barrels for a bit. I'm going to go over some of this a bit later, but I want to get drinking first, and we have some very nice barrels. Let's just go back to the maturation bit, because I'm not very mature, so we can start. So, normally when you drink whiskey, you have whiskey and water, ice, stuff like that. But I like to eat everything and taste everything. So to start with, let's grab the classic laddie on the bottom left of your sheets. And again, gently, very gently, because it's full of snakes. And what you want to do when you want to taste whiskey is not swirl around, you stick your nose in, have a little sniff. It's quite light. Not too amazing, doesn't change your life. It smells like whiskey. But when you get a bit further and you notice there are notes of honey, a bit of vanilla, a bit of dried fruit. Now it's 50% alcohol. It looks like Tiffany but punches like Tyson, so you've got to go easy with it. Have a little sip, just a little sip, save some for a minute as well, just to see how that strength plays out. It's big. It's not the easiest whiskey to get into because it is quite strong. Now, if you look at it as well, actually, we didn't look at it, did we? We forgot to look at it. Because in the words of Jim McEwen, the master distiller, you have to excuse me, it's bullshit. Because 99% of every single whiskey you have drunk is full of E150 caramel colouring. Every single whiskey, bar a couple. There's none in this. This is real whiskey colouring. We don't chill filter, we don't add colouring. This is all natural. So with Bruichladdich, to prove it's not chill filtered, which takes the oil out, which I'll talk about later, we really need to mix it. I don't care what anyone says, I've never seen a master distiller drink whiskey neat unless it's out of a barrel. They always add water. Now ours is 50%, so you don't have to be shy with your drops and you're being precise with it. You can throw some in. But if you want to see something strange, get your glass and very, very slowly pour some water in and let it run down the side of the glass. And what you'll see is the water slipping underneath the whiskey, and you'll see the whiskey float on top. Because we don't chill filter, we leave our oil in there so it floats. And we like to call this the ring of gold. So once you've got it in there, can you see it? You'll see like the funny oily lines. It's a bit harder, I know it's dark down there, but you'll see the oily lines and it'll float. Once you've got your water in, you can do half and half. It's that good and that strong. Then you can unleash your serpent. I love the phrases we get to use. So unleash that serpent, mix it really, really well. You'll notice it'll go a little cloudy as well. And then smell it, and then taste it. And you'll notice that all that bite is gone, and it just becomes a lush, sweet, floral, gentle, delicate whiskey you can drink for breakfast. I mean, early evening. But this is one of my favorite whiskeys. It's so easy to drink, but if no one tells you to add the water, it's a bit full on. So I always drink this with water. And it's the same as putting ice in. If you just put a block of ice in, you're not going to get that dilution. So it'll still be just really strong and really cold. So I like nice chilled water with it, and it's beautiful. Now I pair this with a dark chocolate. So you have a dark chocolate in front of you, please feel free to have a bite of the dark chocolate and then try the whiskey again. The rule I've come across when I'm pairing whiskies is the lighter and sweeter the whiskey, the darker the chocolate. The smokier the whiskey, the creamier the chocolate, the milkier the chocolate. And the same with cheese if you want to do whiskey and cheese. But it works quite nice. That's actually a chili chocolate as well. It's from a very, very special producer in London. Miss Chantal Cody, who actually was the woman who created this thing about percentage of cocoa in chocolate, and also the terroir where the cocoa comes from. So it has a synergy with Bruichladdich. We care about our barley, she cares about our cocoa beans. So it's just a little bit make you think about whiskey in a different way. So you get the nice little spice and the dryness of the chocolate, and then the lovely sweetness of the whiskey. So it's a really nice pairing. Oh, that's good. Fabulous. Oh, now we're back. So that is the first one, and actually the first set there is actually the barley. That is Islay organic barley. Please feel free to try some. Is this it? Yep. It's actually very nice, toasty. It's kind of biscuity. Lovely and crunchy. But it's amazing to think this dry, biscuity grains can turn into this amazing liquid you're drinking. All that sweetness, everything comes out with the skill of distillation. Really, really nice. But it is hard to imagine that that turns into this stuff. So, do we like the first one? Do we like the Tiffany whiskey? Easy to drink. If it's too easy, take some of that water out, or finish it, pour another glass, and then you have it back to full strength. But you can see that it's a whiskey of two halves. Neat, it's kind of punchy and strong and steely. Add the water, fruity, floral, and lovely. This is in Singapore now. It's been around for just over a year, so you can find it around here, and it's throughout Asia. You may not have noticed it or seen it before, but it's hard to miss now when you see this in the bars. But it is around. Next, we are Islay Whisky. And as I mentioned, Islay Whisky, and you may know, is always smoky, with the odd exception. So of course we said, well, we have to be true to our roots. We don't want to put out a smoky version of this and call it Bruichladdich Smoky or anything like that, because people love or hate smoky whiskey, and if they bought the wrong one by accident, then we'd be in trouble. So instead, next to our little village, there's one called Port Charlotte. So we decided to call our smoky village Port Charlotte in honor of their old closed distillery. So this is still Bruichladdich. It is still made by us, but it's just our smoky whiskey, our peaty whiskey. And it's exactly the same. Let's see if I can get the best sound in the world. I'll see if it translates well. Best sound ever. So, this, now we're on to smoky peaty terms. I thought, right, we can change the chocolate up a little bit. So when you have peat and peaty whiskies, you get a bit of the C note. So I thought we'll get a nice milky chocolate. I think it's about 60% cocoa, with a bit of sea salt in there as well. So we're really taking it to Islay right now. And again, you can try it, if you have the chocolate first or a little bit first, the oil will help soften the whiskey. So you don't have to dive straight in with the water. But I'm not going to tell you the correct way to drink it, because you know the correct way to drink it. It's how you like to drink it. But you will get the smoke on the nose, that peat. And we played around with our snake, so now I can just drown it a little bit. Now a lot of people are, as I said, love and hate with Scottish whiskey, with the Islay, with the smoke. It's a Marmite whiskey. You either love it or you hate it. I tend to love it. And a lot of the peaty whiskies are very, very dry and smoky, but what we try and do with Bruichladdich is give you the smoke that the peat heads want, but we want to follow up with that luscious sweetness that we have from the first one. What was me? So when you try it, you are going to get a big hit of smoke. It's not a little bit smoky, it's a lot smoky. Now we're geeks. You may have noticed when we talk about barley and things like that, we're also geeks when it comes to peat. So we take a note of exactly how peaty our whiskey is. And this you're drinking now, the Port Charlotte, is 40 ppm. Especially in Singapore, we know what ppm is thanks to our neighbours. 300, 400, 500 ppm. Actually, what's burning the haze we get from Indonesia is actually peat. It's tropical peat. That's why it smokes so much. You can see how it translates to the whiskey. And this is 40. Now 40 as a gauge for whiskey lovers is about your Lafroig, your Ardbeg, your Lagavulin. So we're up there with the big boys when it comes to the peat. But we, so as I said, we like to be a little bit smoky, a little bit different. But when you pair this with the lovely milky chocolate, how's it going down, okay? Works well? Nice and soft. If you go back and try this one with, and you have any left of the dark chocolate, for me it just doesn't work because it's too dry, it's too spicy. It's more excuse to drink more whiskey. Yeah, so peat. Love a bit of that. What do you think? Who didn't like peaty whiskey before they came in? Anyone? Anyone not a fan? Who likes peaty whiskey now? There we go. Yeah, brilliant, great. Now, how are we doing for time? Plenty of time, great. Now, before we get on to another whiskey, I'll cover another whiskey and then I'll go back and talk about Bruichladdich a little bit more. I want to talk a bit about peat and men. Because men are a bit silly. So, I'm going to come off stage because it gets a bit... I don't mind being it, but it's too far away. Right. Men, we know men. I'm sure the women are going to go, right, they'll agree with everything I'm about to say. And men will too, probably. You go down the pub with your mates, and you're like, oh, last night I had a couple of beers. I think it was 4 or 5, didn't feel too bad, it was good. And there's always that one friend who's like, really? I had 7 beers and 2 shots of tequila, and I was awesome this morning. And then there's always the one guy in the corner like, yeah, I had 2 bottles of whiskey, I had 3 kebabs, an extra 4 shots of tequila, and I woke up this morning at 6 a.m. and went swimming. He's always got to be Mr. One-Up. Well, men also make whiskey. So Jim McEwen was probably down the pub at Port Charlotte with Mr. Ardbeg, Mr. Lagavulin, Mr. Talisker if he was visiting. And they're sitting around talking about their peaty whiskies. Because it is a big thing to be the smokiest whiskey. So they have a discussion. Jim, being a geek, could say, oh, mine's exactly 40 ppm. That's how we do our Port Charlotte. What about you, Mr. Lefroy? And he'd be like, oh, we go up to 40, 44, 46. And short little Ardbeg is like, oh, we've done 60. We have 60 ppm. Big peat. Bar. And they have a discussion, gentleman's discussion. How peaty can you make a whiskey? It's a great discussion to have. You know, when you're talking numbers and ppm and scientific and drinking lots of whiskey. But they kind of came to a decision that if this is 40 you're drinking now, they said, well, you could probably make an 80 ppm whiskey. But that'd have to be like the maximum, double peat. But it would probably be undrinkable. It'd just be too much. It'd be like pouring whiskey in an ashtray, you know, so it wouldn't be any good. Now, Jim is the guy who we told him, you cannot put whiskey in a blue bottle because no one's going to buy it. Didn't really work. You can't do it at 50% because it's too strong, people aren't going to buy it. Jim's like, but I like it like that. So it's 50%. No colouring, nothing involved. So he basically does what you can't do. So that got him thinking. 80 ppm, 80 ppm, 80 ppm. Well, I don't think that's true. I bet I could make an 80 ppm whiskey. So he went away and created something called Octomore, which is the 3rd whiskey we're going to try. Now I have to confess something here. You're all incredibly special. Octomore has been voted the world's best whiskey. It's very, very limited release. And today we were going to taste the 6.1, which is actually the best, peatiest so far. But instead you are going to be the first consumers in Asia to try Octomore 7.1, which is brand new. Now this is a bit different. I do not want you to touch your glasses, or if you do, very gently, because we'll drink it together and then I'll talk about some more, because I just can't wait anymore, because this stuff is incredible. And I want us all to drink it together in the way I'm going to teach you, because I'm going to tell you how to drink this whiskey, which I can do, not whiskey in general, because that's your choice. So, Octomore 7.1. So this is pretty strong. It's stronger than the ones you've had before. This is 59.5% alcohol. But I don't want you to add any water to it, because it's fun. So, when I tell you, the way we drink Octomore is you take a glass. You don't have to do it with me now, we'll do it again in a minute. Very carefully, because we don't, this cobra is big and he's angry. So you have a sip and you hold it on your tongue for about 5 seconds. I'll give you a count if you like. Obviously with your mouth closed. And then we swallow it together. And then you just enjoy. So, are we ready to drink some Octomore? Brilliant. Right then. So, let's do it on 3. Make it easier so we can all do it together. So, 1, 2, 3. And swallow. Ooh. Take a nice deep breath. Just checking. I didn't hear any coughs. I didn't hear I didn't hear any of that. Right? Your tongue is a bit hot, right? And your chest is really nice and warm. It's like post-National Day fireworks are still going on. But how's your throat? Is it in pain? Does it burn? Or is it... Right, so that's 59.5% neat whiskey, the smokiest whiskey in the world that you've just drunk, and no coughing, nothing. And there's a lot of ladies here as well. So I'm saying anything, but generally it's what I found is the ladies normally really like the smoky whiskey more than the men. But nothing. So, I want to play a game. Right, so, that whiskey, very, very strong. It's obviously nice and smooth. It's very smoky. That whiskey is 208 ppm. 208. So if that whiskey was air, you would not be allowed outside. But it's amazing. So now, just for those who know, the retail price, well, the discounted retail price of this in the UK is about £170, which means it's about 300 and something, 350 cent. So the blue one is around, well, if you find it retail, probably about 150 cent. So that's expensive. Listen at you at the back. Terrible. Right, so, very expensive. Very smooth, very strong. How old is it? I mean, it's really smooth. And if it's that strong and that smoky, it means it's got to have a lot of mellowing. So, anyone want to hazard a guess? Who drinks whiskey? Who drinks whiskey? Smoky whiskey. Right, at the back. What whiskey do you normally drink? Smoky whiskey, what do you like? Your Kalila. Oh, they might so. So, Kalila, that normally comes out in like a 12 and a 16-year-old. And a 30. So how smooth, what does this compare with? 12, the 16, the 30? How old for the smoothness? Have a guess. The optimal. 12, 18? 8, 10? 25? Anyone? 12 years old? 15? 18 years old? 25? 18? So it's as smooth as an 18-year-old. Does anybody know how old Octomore is? Huh? 3? 8? No. God, these people are crazy. It's 5 years old. So, all these people want you to focus on bigger numbers, 30 years old, 50 years old. You've just drunk one of the world's best whiskies that is the smokiest in the world, it's very strong, and it's 5 years old. I told you to forget what you knew about whiskey. Age doesn't matter. If you put, well, younger obviously the better. If you put a bad whiskey in a barrel, it doesn't matter how long it's in that barrel for. If the barrel is bad, it's going to ruin what could be a good whiskey. This is why at Bruichladdich, we pioneered the use of NAS statements, non-age statement whiskies. Who cares how long it's in the barrel? We don't make the barrels, we buy them. But we grow the barley. Our farmers grow the barley. That is a big, big difference. And if you have any of your whiskey left, you can see that the barley doesn't taste like the whiskey, does it? Really, the barley does not taste like that final product. But it can, if you take your whiskey, pour a little bit in the palm of your hand, rub it till it's dry, and smell your hands, and you will smell the barley of the corresponding whiskies. It's true! So I like to take a little bit of Port Charlotte, just smells like whiskey, but as soon as you rub it till it really goes dry, then it actually does go back and smells just like that barley. That's the right idea in the front here, that's what we want. Yeah, just plant the ears, little dab. That's why we give you these lovely corks. Beautiful. So we've tried 3 whiskies, there's some barley for you to try and the chocolate, but I just want to talk to you a bit about, is my presentation still up there? Here we go, maturation. So, I said we don't talk too much about maturation because we don't put how old our whiskies are on the bottle except with the Octomore. And the only reason Jim put it on the bottle was because they said you can't tell people it's 5 years old. No one will buy it. So we did it on purpose. That's Jim. So the maturation, the sweetness you get from the first one. A lot of our whiskies are aged in Chateau Yquem, which you may know is one of the world's greatest wines. We use a lot more wine than sherry or other barrels, just because it allows us more play, because there's a big difference between the wines. For the sharp-eyed ones, this is some Lafite. We use a lot of Lafite. These are all bourbon, so we use a lot of Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, Maker's Mark. And the weird thing is, I'm showing you this. There's not many others, whiskey makers will actually show you pictures like this, where you can actually see Heaven Hill, Rebel Yell, Daniel Distillery. They like to keep it all a secret, but this is how we make our whiskey, so I have to show you this. I want you to understand that, you know, we go out to the fields and see when our barley is ready. If you go through duty free, what you'll see is a few funny coloured tins. You'll see a silver one, which is bear barley, which is actually the barley that the Vikings brought over to the Hebrides. So it's the oldest known cultivated strand of barley. And I do recommend you buy that one, because if you see it, it tastes like the first one mixed with walnuts. It's a really nutty whiskey. The blue one you'll see at duty free is 100% organic. So we are championing biodiverse and biodynamic whiskey. And blending. So you'll notice our barrels here, some of them have got white fronts, some of them have got black fronts. So this is actually, last time I was in Islay, which was in March, I actually made a batch of the classic laddie. So if the next sales dip, I know, no, I didn't do so well, I was probably drunk. But for one batch, we use about 40 barrels, and it's a recipe. So the white fronts mean the barrel has been used once before for whiskey, and then it gets painted blue if they've used it twice. So it's a big mix, and we roll all the barrels out. That's Evil Striker up there. So we line them up, and then this is how it actually gets to the bottle, because some people have never seen this. You roll them on the floor, and underneath you have a big trough, and you tap the barrels, and it all runs down into the ground, which is then piped up into tanks, which is then sent to bottling. There we go, bottling. Now this is another reason Bruichladdich is a bit different. Who drinks Islay whiskey? Yep, great, got some people around, fantastic. Have you been to other Islay whiskey tastings? And you've seen some of the literature? For the record, Bruichladdich is the only whiskey on Islay to age its whiskey on Islay. Which is a bit of a surprise, because a lot of the literature you see with some whiskies is, you know, warehouses and the sea slamming up against it, and yeah, they're probably empty. We're the only ones that age 100% on Islay. Because the others ship it off to Glasgow, and it ages in Glasgow next to the bottling plant, because it's all automated. So some of the biggest whiskies on Islay actually employ about 6 to 8 people in their distillery runs. Not naming names, but 6 to 8. And they make 6 times more whiskey than we do. We employ 65 people, because we do everything on Islay. So the reason we're a bit more expensive is because we have to ship everything over to Islay. We bottle it with our state-of-the-art bottling plant, and then we ship it back. We do bottle by hand. Why do we bottle by hand? Anyone have a guess? Tastes better. I'm kidding. But if we bottle by hand, it means that's 2 people on Islay that we can give a job to. Well, a lot more people than 2, but there's only 2 there. The other one's just, I don't know, probably gone for tea. But we really believe this connection between Islay matters. So, nice little, there we go. So these are the 3 villages. So that's us again. So this is the little lake up on the hill I told you where our water comes from. And the weird thing about this lovely blue lake is that it's not blue. It's red. That is what it looks like on a sunny day, which was officially, I think, the only sunny day last summer. I couldn't believe it. It was the first time I've been up there, and I was like, it's red. And basically, it's all peat. So the rain seeps through the soil, and this loch is all red water. Which means if you drink it, it tastes really bad. But if you use it to make the mash and distill it, you don't get any of that peat coming through. So it's clear again. But that's the base of our water, and it's, again, no technology. It's a big cast iron tap, and it runs down the hill into the distillery. We've tasted it already. But we really believe that it should have an authenticity. We're authentic. We don't add anything. We don't have any computers. Everything's done by hand. No coloring, no filtering. And people think we're mad, and we're called the progressive distillers. But my response to that is, oh, we're all modern and different. It's like, no. 100 years ago, if you were making whiskey in Scotland, you would have used barley that's growing outside your house. 100 years ago, you would not add caramel colouring, because 100 years ago, they wouldn't have done that. They would have chill filtered because it hadn't been invented yet. You wouldn't have had 12-year-old, 18-year-old, none of this traditional whiskey aging that we think of now. You would have just drunk it when it tastes good. And it wouldn't always be in lovely fancy bottles. It would be in pots and things like that. And of course, it would be aged where you made the whiskey. So we're actually more traditional and more authentic than many of the brands out there, even though we look kind of cool in our blue bottle and our nice blue clothes. And people do say, and I'm sure you're wondering, is why is it blue? Why is it that colour blue? Well, that's the colour of Scotland. That's the colour of Islay. And people say, no, no, it's brown and grey and rainy and mountains and grrr and cows and coos and stuff. Well, that's Islay when the sun comes out. So that's why the bottle is blue, because that is the colour of Islay. That's what you see when you come into land in your plane, which is about 12 seats and scary as hell when the wind's blowing. The runway is next to the beach, probably for a good reason. If you get blown over, you just like slowly come to a stop in the sand. But it is an amazing place, and I think it gives birth to the most amazing whiskey ever. So non-chill filtered, no colouring free. Our farmers are proud to grow for us. They put those signs up on their own just because they want to say, look, 1914 was the last time Islay barley was used to make Islay whiskey, until 2004 when we started doing it. And now we have 13 farms that actually grow for us Islay, and we can tell you the farmer, the field it comes from. Some of our special editions are single farm editions, depending if they get enough from the harvest. So and if you do a lineup of the Islay barley, this is the Scottish barley range, you can taste the difference. So of course terroir matters, barley really matters. So 13 farms now. Jim, our master distiller, is amazing. He's actually just retired last month after 52 years making whiskey. The most decorated and awarding master distiller on the planet ever was Jim. And Adam is the new one. And he looks a bit young. But that's cool, because most of our people at our distillery are young. Yeah, we make different whiskey. We don't want to be tied down by tradition and, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that. So we like to have fun. And this is going through the Optimal range. Here we go. This is more of our wonderful technology. And this is the most complex bit of kit in the whole distillery. Remember I said we had the big mash tun and we had a very special way to see how full it was? Stick technology. We have a stick with a rope around it we throw in, and that floats on the top, and it goes over a beam, and depending on how full or empty it is, it moves the arrow, so we know exactly how much is in there. It's brilliant. That's about as high-tech as we get. But that's Farmer James Brown, not the other one. And he runs Optimal Farm, he owns it, so his coos are there, that's cows. And he has a well, the Optimal well, and all the water that we use to water down our whiskey comes straight out of the ground. And he drives it 2 miles to the distillery on a tractor 4 times a week. Big tanks of it. So again, we don't have a tap at the distillery. And the lake at the top, if that runs out, then we have to stop making whiskey. In 2015, owned by a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company like Remy Cointreau, if it doesn't rain for 3 weeks, we have to stop making whiskey. But we're an island, so it never stops raining for more than 3 weeks. And again, authenticity, Islay grown, there's our well, everything is done locally, and the people matter. So this is just a last thought before we go. So to give you some relevance, here we go. Singapore, 716 square kilometers. Islay, 619. So it's getting close to the same size. Singapore's more efficient, you see, it's nice and smooth. Isla's a little jagged, they haven't got the shape sorted out yet. So population, as of last year, it might be a bit more now, 5,400,000. How many people live on Isla? How many? 5,000? 10,000? Almost the same size. There's a lot of space on Isla. Now to put that in perspective, that's people. So if you divide that by 4 for say a family, you're around 800 families.
3,200.
And this is the bit that really makes me get all emotional. A few years ago, Isla was famous for whiskey, but it didn't employ many people. Like I said, some of the distilleries only have like 10, 12 people. Farming. It was a massive dairy and beef community on Isla. And think about that. I mean, I've got more Facebook friends than that. So if you live on Isla, 800, you probably know a lot of the people. Now, we had something in the early 2000s called BSC, CJD, Creutzfeldt-Jakob, bovine spongiform fund disease. And it was basically mad cow disease. So pretty much 600 families would have lost their livelihood because they had to kill every cow on the island. And you can't go and buy new ones because they're expensive. So based on that, this happened quite, I'll say a mark of serendipity is, we actually said to these farmers, who are our friends, we knew them, they were neighbours, if you grow barley on Isla, which hadn't been done for almost 100 years, we'll use that to make whiskey. So they did. And this is why, if you walk around Isla with a Bruichladdich anything, top, hat, people will stop, they'll honk their horns, they'll talk to you because we helped rebuild and save the community. And it's amazing, just the amount of impact that we had. We're the biggest employer on Isla, even though there's all those other distilleries and other farmers. There's 65 people at the last count, not including our farmers. So I do all get all teary because I know these people and it's amazing when we talk about it. And we do have 20,000 sheep. I put the geese on there. I know exactly how many geese are on there as well. We have about, I think it's 22,000 geese for 6 months that we can't eat or kill or beat to death for eating our barley. But we're the biggest private employer. So for us, it's more than just the whiskey. You know, these are all people that still work there. Duncan, he was the guy at the start, if you saw the big sort of moody picture, that's Duncan there. He was the guy holding the peat. We make him do a lot, actually. He should retire. In fact, I think he has retired. And then Jim and Joanne, you can see a lot of young faces. So that's the faces of Bruichladdich at the moment. So we love it. We love our whiskey. We love people who enjoy it. So thank you very much. That's hard going. So I hope you learned something. Enjoy the whiskey. It is a bit crazy. There's some mad stuff in there. But I hope you really take something away. And just ask questions. When you drink whiskey in future, you know, really think about what are you paying for? Is it the flavour you like? Or are you drinking it because you saw some nice pictures or because someone recommended it? You know, only do stuff because you want to. Yeah? I mean, the only reason you're having chocolate is because I really like chocolate. So I thought, I can buy lots of chocolate. And there's always spare for me. So I'll be around a little bit. If you want to ask any questions, any more in-depth stuff, come and grab me. I don't want to get too geeky on all of you. Some of you just want to get hammered on.